You're listening to the My Simplified Life podcast, and this is episode number 93. Welcome to the My Simplified Life podcast, a place where you will learn that your past and even your present don't define your future. Regardless of what stage of life you're in, I want you to feel inspired and encouraged to pursue your dreams, simplify your life, and start taking action today. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac, and I'm excited to share my stories and life lessons with you while taking you on my own journey. This is My Simplified Life. Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Michelle Glogovac. If you've had a corporate career of most any sort, then you probably know all too well what burnout is like. Answering emails at all hours, traveling across the country and sometimes the world for a meeting, always trying to get ahead and just keep going. What's the point at which you stop, though? For my guest today, that all came to a crashing halt when she ended up in the emergency room and had lost all of her motor skills. Elizabeth Rosenberg was working over 60 hours a week, going nonstop for one of the largest ad and marketing agencies in the world, working on the largest account in the world when she literally collapsed. She was overly dedicated, to say the least, and ever since then has been on a journey to ensure she's healthy, thriving, and not making the same mistakes over again. I loved my conversation with Elizabeth because there's a lot of parallels in going from corporate to becoming entrepreneurs for both of us. I hope you learn a thing or two and don't make the same mistakes that we did. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi, Michelle. How are you?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Same.
I feel like we know each other already, and we kind of do, but...
I think we're only going to get to know each other better after this. So
absolutely. Here on out. We're going to become best friends who own a vineyard together someday. Exactly. Can you take a moment to introduce yourself to everyone, please?
Of course. My name is Elizabeth Rosenberg. I am based in Los Angeles, fifth generation Californian. And after a 20-year decade in career in PR and marketing, I quit my job on March 2nd of 2020 and launched a new marketing and PR consultancy called The Good Advice Company.
I love it. And let's talk about why you quit your big PR job. Let's talk about what really put your name kind of on the mark in the world of PR per se, with the story that you shared with everyone.
Yeah. So about... I want to say maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I was working for a very well-known, infamous, large company, and their dedicated ad agency. And I was the global head of communications. I could not have loved my job more. I was working on the most amazing things with the most creative people in the world. I was traveling the world in offices all over the place. But I ended up burning out and landed in the hospital with a migraine where I lost all of my motor skills. They thought I was either having a stroke or a drug overdose, but it ended up being stress. So I wrote the story down. And then as the world was reopening and the pandemic was starting to look like there was a light at the end of the tunnel, I felt like it was a good time to get that story out. And man, oh man, was it relatable. The amount of emails and text messages and LinkedIn, connections I have gotten since then has just been both pretty supportive and amazing, but also just traumatizing.
And now when you say you were working, I mean, you did like 60 plus hours a week. I read that when you got out of the hospital, you had a bajillion messages.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was doing around 60 hours a week. I mean, I think it's in advertising and marketing, that's and it's kind of like startup tech land, that is very common. I think in a lot of industries that's common. People just don't really talk about it. And I had that year specifically traveled 80,000 miles.
Wow.
A lot of time on a plane. Again, I stayed in beautiful hotels and I met amazing people and I ate great food. And it's one of those things that I would never complain about, because I look back at that being one of the best experiences of my life. And what a gift it was that I even had the opportunity to do that. I mean, talk about privilege. But it was, I think the thing that my takeaway from it is it was self-inflicted. My biggest, while I actually love to work, my biggest concern was if I didn't look like I was working hard enough or I wasn't getting everything on my list checked off, that I would be seen as an unsuccessful leader and, not pulling my weight, not doing my job.
And I think that's very common.
Super common. In all honesty, none of us are ever going to cross everything off the list. It's just not possible.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that, because just this morning, a friend of mine posted on Instagram saying that she was thankful now that she works for herself. She's an attorney, that she can take an afternoon off to bring her kids to the golf course. And I said, I'm actually reading this while I'm on a 2-mile walk with my kids at 9 a.m. And this afternoon we'll go swimming. And for me, these are the big, stress reliever. Like, I can do this and it's okay. And also recognizing that not every email has to be answered within 30 minutes of receiving it, if, not shorter. Because there was a time in my life when I worked in corporate and I would answer an email at 2 a.m.
I think in general, society in the US has made that the norm. There was that funny meme that was going around that it was like, it was like a European tweet or out of office that was like, I'm going on vacation this summer, see you in September. Mm-hmm. And then the US version was like, I'm having, surgery on my, whatever, a spleen or something. I'll be back in 2 hours to respond to your email.
That was literally me. I had a miscarriage and a DNC, and I was literally answering emails that afternoon.
You poor thing. I have heard so many stories of that, of people in surgery replying to emails. I was doing the exact same thing. I was literally laying in the emergency room, looking at my phone while I really had I couldn't talk. I couldn't do anything. But the first thing, I asked for was does anyone know where my phone is? And everyone's like, you need to chill.
Yeah.
You're going to be fine. It's like, oh God. But I had this huge fear of, I think, disappointing everyone around me.
And so how did you come out of that? You're in the hospital. They find out that no, it wasn't drugs.
That was just wild. And I totally get, because I had sweat through all my clothes. I had vomit on my sweater. I get why they thought it was drugs. And then I get also why they thought it was a stroke. I could not, I was landlocked. I could not talk. I couldn't do anything. And then I went into shock. So I was convulsing in there. It was an experience. Of what I remember from it, it was quite the experience. From there, it's interesting, and I write about this in the article, is that I would have given anything for a doctor to have said to me, oh, you have a brain tumor. That was the reason for this, which is so sad to say that that's kind of you so badly want there to be a medical excuse for something that happens to you. And so many people that I've talked to have all of these medical mysteries and have no idea. The reality is a lot of them are self-induced and a lot of them are from stress. We're just not willing to accept that, and to accept the fact that when you learn that you've done this to yourself, then there's the whole emotional roller coaster of having to accept that. Mm-hmm. And address what your next steps are to not do it again. So not only are you dealing with the physical stuff, but then you're also dealing with the emotional stuff.
And how did you deal with it? You come out of the hospital and you're like, oh, shucks.
Yeah,
I just did that to myself. Where do you go from there? Do you keep going 60 hours a week?
Well, I went to every doctor possible in an attempt for someone to tell me what was actually wrong with me. And all of them came back with no, girl, you're stressed. You need to take some time off, which was the thing I didn't want to hear. Because again, it sounds crazy, but I loved my job. But then I went on this wellness journey. I did everything in my power to try and find anything possible that could potentially give me relief. Now, I'm a little unique in the sense that like not really. There's millions of migraine sufferers all over the world. I have had migraines since I was 4. So this was just like an extreme circumstance. But I'm also like that medical mystery. Like I always have something wrong with me and it's always just kind of a joke to like my family and friends. But I did some heavy research of like, what are the Eastern, Western, spiritual, all of the things in between? How can I find something that could potentially work? So I've tried, I remember, the whole essential oil situation. Everyone's like, try oils. This will be great. That did not work at all. It was comical. I did body work. I worked out with a physical therapist. I did elimination food diets. I did past life regressions. I did acupuncture and traditional Chinese medicine. Over the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, have been on this intense wellness journey to figure out what works for you and what doesn't work for you. And I think I say you because there is no silver bullet that works for me that's going to work for someone else. Mm-hmm. So I think the most frustrating thing ever is when you have something wrong with you and everyone's like, oh my God, try this. You will feel great.
Right.
And you're like, solid, like that worked for you. That definitely didn't work for me. And then you just feel defeated because you spent a lot of money on something that was like a cure-all for someone else and didn't work for you at all.
So what if all of that has worked for you?
So the things, and I say this like as genuinely like the only thing that really, really worked for me, there's 2 things that worked for me. One is therapy, and I wouldn't even call it therapy. I feel like it's a word that needs to be rebranded in 2021. To me, a therapist is like someone that you go, and talk to who blames everything on your parents. I worked with, she calls herself a metaphysical healer, and she's really kind of like a life coach, and really made me feel and held me accountable for how I feel and how I relate to things and how I deal with things. She gave me homework every week. She addressed relationships. I'm a twin. She addressed relationships with my sisters, with my parents, with my coworkers. But in the end, I had such a sense of relief that I was actually feeling very seen, and I was working through some trauma that wasn't really trauma. I grew up with a very, in a great childhood, but everybody has something, whether you have really, really intense trauma or even you just have, disagreements with your family. Everybody has something that they need to work through and they need to deal with in order to be a fully functioning human. That was super helpful. And the other thing is I work with an acupuncturist and do traditional Chinese medicine. And on the physical side, that has completely changed everything in my life. It's evened out my hormones. It keeps the stress at bay. It's amazing. So,
see, I've tried acupuncture and it didn't do anything for me. It increased my stress having to drive on the freeway to get to the appointment.
The thing, but it's funny because I actually don't know if it's the acupuncture that works, or I actually think it's the herbs that have made like a huge difference for me. And So it's funny because like in the pandemic, what has worked best for me in the pandemic is I have started like pretty much like stress walking, where I'm like, I got to get the hell out of this house.
I do the same thing. I went from like being basically sitting at my desk all day long to getting like 12,000 steps a day in. And I'm like, oh, I feel better and I'm trimming down. This is amazing.
I think that people really underestimate the benefits of just walking. It's funny because I feel like a lot of people, and there's so many apps about it and all this stuff, it's like the cure all for everyone is meditation. Mm-hmm. I'm an awful meditator. I have a really hard time sitting in silence, even though I know it's beneficial for you. And I really see my walks as like a moving meditation. So once you can change your kind of outlook on what works for you, and that like what your meditation looks like or what your health really revolves around for you, and also how to make it like easy.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think that's the thing is everyone really tries to they read a lot of books and they read a lot of articles, and a lot of the stuff out there is not easy. It's expensive and it's a process. Like start with baby steps. Everything is easier that way.
Well, and I think when you're like you and I and we're doers, we're constantly doing something. To go out for a walk feels like it's like a guilty pleasure of, oh, if I do this, then, I could be over here, finishing up this piece of work. So like on my walks, I pop the AirPods in, and if I'm not listening to music, I'm listening to a podcast. So I still feel like I'm educating myself or, getting something done or out of the actual walk.
Oh, you and I are yes, exactly. I'm the exact same way. It's either music or a podcast. Sometimes I'm now even doing, like meetings while I'm doing it, while I'm walking. And I think that not every meeting needs to be a Zoom.
Oh, yeah.
So I've actually also, and I highly recommend this for everybody, is take a week off your Zoom. Just say like, I don't do Zooms this week. You're welcome to reach me via phone call.
I couldn't agree more. And I just blocked out all of July from any kind of meeting.
Good.
I'm like, you know what? I don't feel like it. I'm going to do all of my podcasts this month. I'll get through August, and I'm just not going to take any phone calls. The end. And a girlfriend of mine was like, that's amazing. I'm going to do it next week. I'm like, just a week? Let's do longer. Come on.
I read an article somewhere, which honestly I felt was just like brilliant. And they're called untouchable days. And this woman has an untouchable day once a week. I felt like hers was like Wednesdays, mine are Fridays, where you have no meetings, no phone calls, and you can either get work done, you can run errands, you can do anything, but like there is no like external communication.
Mine are Mondays and Fridays.
Brilliant. It is, but those are boundaries that you also have to hold other people accountable for respecting.
Well, and I think that's a big part is yourself respecting that, because in the beginning, when I said this, I'm like, I'm going to block my calendar, and it's not that I don't work. It's just that I'm not taking calls or interviews those 2 days of the week. And I would find myself saying, well, here's a link to my calendar. Oh, but if there's nothing on there that you can find fits your schedule, let me know. I can move something. And then I'm like, that's nonsense. That's bullshit. Let's be honest.
Exact same thing.
And so I no longer do. I'm like,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Yeah. Good for you. And I hope more businesses start to allow people to do this, because in all honesty, I hear individual contractors, freelancers, small business owners that are putting practices like this into their everyday life. And it's making I think it's creating healthy boundaries, but it's also just making obviously their lives better. But large businesses are just not allowing this kind of work ethic. And I say work ethic. It's not like we're not working.
Right.
And I think that there needs to be some drastic changes in how we approach what a traditional, work week looks like. Because all of these meetings, I mean, the pandemic has allowed us to do so much via Zoom and virtually. But now that people are getting back to what some kind of regular life looks like, there's no room for travel. There is no room for, independent time. Like commuting is almost impossible because people are booking Zooms at all hours of the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what that's going to look like moving forward.
Well, and I hope that companies are able to see that stuff can get done without all of the travel, without having to be in an office. My husband didn't travel for over a year, and he's in sales, yet he made his goals.
Yeah.
So that was proof right there that you don't have to be right in front of somebody all the time.
100%.
And I love that, the not feeling guilty about not just having untouchable days, but being able to work wherever you want to. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, I worked from my pool. And in the corporate world, I would never do that. Like, tell someone I'm out watching my kids, splashing around. Oh, no. Michelle's taking the day off.
Good for you. Well, and how's that any different than working from your bed, which is where most people worked for, over a year?
Right.
Not at all. You just haven't, that's the other thing too, that I think that I hope the last year has brought us is a lot more people are spending time outside. And I think that we forget that like the sun is good for you with sunscreen, obviously, but you know what I mean? Just like the fresh air is good for you. Like grass is good for you. Nature is good for you. And what a mood changer those can be if you allow yourself the opportunity to take that time.
Absolutely. And so now when you started your own business, how did you make sure that you were practicing these new practices?
It is a great question. And I have to admit, I continue to make mistakes. When I started, I had untouchable days like you. I was like, oh, but if you need to do this, it's fine. I also think that, because I'm in PR and marketing, the business has been very, really busy. There's a lot of people who are rebranding. There's a lot of people who are launching things. And it's hard to say no because I have no idea when that will slow down. So I think in general, it's also being very cognizant of working with the right partners and the right people, but still having that, that untouchable time and also just that personal time. So I think that, the one thing that has really kept me kind of accountable throughout all of this is I've continued to work with an executive coach. And it was so funny. There was there was a quote a long, long time ago that said, if you had $1 left over, you should spend it on PR. And the funny thing being in PR is I would say, if you had $1 to left over, I would say to spend it on coaching. It really helps keep the train moving. It helps you focus on what brings you joy. It helps focus on your superpowers of what you're good at. Because I think as we continue throughout our career, we get so pigeonholed in the things that we know how to do versus the things that we actually enjoy doing. And we second guess ourselves that if I really enjoy this, can I make money doing it?
Right.
So it's interesting because as I've been, again, through this kind of like wellness journey of how to stay healthy and how to create boundaries and all of that, how to not get into a place where I'm burning out again. I also really struggle with what am I good at? What do I love to do? How can I make money doing that versus how do I build a business of something that I know how to do and I know will be successful?
Oh, that resonates like you have no idea.
Yeah.
I came from aviation where I knew how to do that. And I did sales, and yet it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so I created something completely new, as you know.
Yeah.
And it brings me joy to do what I'm doing and to know that, saying no is okay.
It takes practice, honestly.
A lot.
It is a skill to say no and to be okay with saying no. And the other thing is to say no and be okay with potentially missing out on something that you don't really need to be a part of.
Right.
I think that we were also, in this society, we've been so conditioned that like of this FOMO world. And I think FOMO is a huge reality in business of like, everyone's in that meeting. I need to be in that meeting, or everyone's, working on this, or everyone's going to this conference. And sometimes it's like, but do I really want to, or do I think I should be doing that?
Absolutely. I remember those days where I was like, oh, well, you're all flying across the country. Well, then I better do it too.
Totally.
I'll show up. And for me, it changed when I had my first child. I was like, no, I don't want to.
Yeah.
Can I just call in and be on the call? Because I don't physically need to be there.
But then you also had to learn that like, it was okay if I wasn't there, So I think that I'm hoping that because we all weren't there last year, right? That hopefully that will, some of the lessons that we learned from that will make a difference too.
And I think we're becoming more and more of a digital age. We've had the internet for a while, obviously, but as we're seeing with Zooms and, emails, or everything's much more prevalent now, podcasts and all these things where we can actually just do it all from home. We don't actually have to get on a plane and go somewhere, show up in the conference room. We can have a virtual one.
Well, and I think for parents, it allows the chance to be able to have breakfast and dinner with your kids and not miss those life moments that many of my friends have missed because they were on a business trip.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
I think that's a life decision, but it's one that I hope more people make because those things bring you joy as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
So are you working 60 hours a week or have you cut back?
It's fine. That was a good question. I found myself in late May having very aggressive, work hours again. And I think it was for a variety of reasons. I think there were so many clients that I'd worked with over the last, year that I just really, really love and I wanted to help. There was also just stuff that was super interesting that I didn't want to turn down. Thankfully, and I think that had to do with the fact that with the pandemic and, loosening up a little bit, everybody was trying to get stuff out the door at the same time. But as the summer's continuing, a lot of people are taking vacation. I mean, it's really impressive the amount of people that are just like, you know what, I'm going out of town this week and you cannot get a hold of me, which yay boundaries. So it was a good lesson for me to remember that that's not the kind of work-life balance that I am looking for.
Absolutely. So you're not working. You didn't answer the question though.
I was.
Are you?
I'm not. I know. I CPR'd that question. So I did work about 3 60-hour weeks. And then I had like a emergency coaching session where I was like, this is going downhill quickly. This is not good. And then he really helped me kind of reprioritize what I want to do, what I want to be working on, and how to kind of manage things better. My point in coaching, and I think this is why I'm bringing this up, is that like, it's really hard to do all this stuff by yourself.
Mm-hmm.
You sometimes need, even if it's a friend that's coaching you or a mentor or somebody that you can call and just be like, am I, this is what's going on right now. Like, do you have any advice? I think is really, really valuable. An outside perspective kind of always seems to help point you in the right direction. So no, I am not working 60 hours a week anymore.
Good.
Is not healthy. And it's also just so beautiful outside. I would like to enjoy it. We've all been
absolutely
wrong.
I find that I need to replace like whatever it is that I would be doing work-wise with something else just to make myself not do the work. Like I will check emails all the time, even though I actually have in my onboarding packets for my clients of here are my office hours and there's a start and a stop time.
Yeah.
And yet I'm like, oh, has somebody emailed me? No, because they know I'm not going to answer.
Yeah.
So I've gotten good at scheduling a response. So if I do want to respond, I type it up and then I schedule it to be sent during normal business hours.
Good job.
And then for me, picking up a book instead of looking at my emails has helped.
Yeah. One thing that I did, and I did this years ago, probably 3 years ago, is I moved my phone out into the living room. So between pretty much like 9:30, 10 and 7 a.m., my phone is out there. I have it on Do Not Disturb. I have the important clients on the, you can get through the bat phone list. And then I have the ringer on, obviously. But it's really, really, really made a huge difference in not only my quality of sleep, but just in my stress levels with that not being in my room.
Yeah, that's important.
That takes a lot of, that takes a little leap of faith and a lot of discipline to do that.
It does. I find myself, I carry my phone around all over the house. I'm like, oh, I'm going from my desk to the kitchen. It's like 20 steps.
Yeah.
And yet I take it. I go to the bathroom. Oh, what am I going to do in the bathroom? I guess I'll check my emails. Like, really? Yeah. Do you really need to?
I mean, I also think, it depends on your relationship with social media. I mean, I really only have social media on my desktop. And I look at Instagram like once in a while, but like not having that on your phone will stop you from checking your phone all the time.
That's true.
Yeah.
Now you're giving me ideas. I feel like you're giving me homework.
I mean, and again, I want to like be super clear. Like this has taken me, this has been a long journey for me. This has been about 5 years of intense practicing of the things that I don't even preach, the things that I do that make me, feel a little bit better. But yeah, they are things that I believe that do work. I mean, the digital detox thing, it's like, that's not one of those things. It's like, no, that won't work for you. Like that works for everyone.
Yes.
Like that's
it
not,
does.
You know what I mean? Like that's not even a question. It's just kind of like, get off your phone. You'll feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why one of the reasons why I love our summer afternoons where I take the kids in the pool, because the phone's not coming in the pool with me.
Yeah.
So that is my digital detox, unless I'm working out there and then you see a picture of them in the pool, then I've got it with me, but otherwise it's gone.
I think also the idea that you don't need to document everything.
Yes.
So that's a hard one because I know that so many people love sharing things that they have experienced, but like I'm a big live music concert goer, and filming like an entire concert, like while you're at the concert, to me, like is crazy. Purpose, experience the music. It's super fun. So trying to like also wrap my head around that is like that I don't have to share everything that I'm doing with the world or my, few followers, makes a huge difference too, because then you just don't have that constant need for everyone else's approval.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now I have this question is kind of off of the topic of the burnout and stress is how did you come up with your company name?
I didn't.
I don't think you've even shared it.
I did beginning, I think. My company is called The Good Advice Company. I actually have an amazing mentor. His name is Matt Jarvis, CEO, strategist, just could not be a more incredible human. And he's continued to coach me and mentor me, even after I worked for him. And, I was like really stuck on my company name, and naming a company is the hardest thing to do in the world because you need obviously your social handles and your website and, copywriting and like everything. It's just a huge pain. And then it has to, say something about you without saying everything about you. And he and I were talking and I was like, God, I'm just having such a hard time naming this company. He's like, well, your superpower is that you really like use your intuition to give great advice. And he was like, what about The Good Advice Company? And I was like, I don't know. And I like Googled it while I was on the phone with him. And I was like, oh my God, everything is available. So he was like, buy it all now. And if for some reason you choose not to use it, I'll use it for something else. And then within like 2 weeks, I had a logo. It all just like came together, and everyone who knows me said that it was just so on brand for who I am as a human, that I give him all the credit. He knew me well enough to know that it was the perfect name for me and my company.
That's perfect. My husband came up with My Simplified Life, which was originally just for a blog that I started that I was like, well, I'm going to start the podcast. It'll be the same. And then I took the MSL part to be the agency.
Yeah,
name.
I love that name, Simplified Life. I think it is so smart, and you so clearly know what it is right out of the gates.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Right? Yeah.
My sister says she doesn't have a clue as to what it is.
Well, it was okay. My mom said to me, she goes, well, what if you give bad advice? And I was like, oh my God.
But Mom, I don't give bad advice.
Exactly. I'm like, I don't do that. Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, you're such a joy. I love getting to know you more and more every time we talk, Elizabeth.
Thank you for having me. And me too. I know this is the start to a beautiful friendship. So I can't wait.
Yes. I love it. Can you share with everyone where they can find you and your good advice?
Yes. So LinkedIn, just look up Elizabeth Rosenberg, and Twitter, Good Advice Co. Actually, I think all of my social handles are that. But Twitter and LinkedIn are the best places to find me.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I love hearing the happiness and ease in Elizabeth's voice because you can tell she has found a good place for herself. All too often, we let our work dictate our lives, and that's not how it should be. Whether you have a corporate job or are working for yourself, it's extremely important to remember to put yourself first. Ensure there's room for your health and wellness, both physically and mentally. Experiment with what works best for you and know that unless you're saving lives, the phone calls and emails can probably wait for just a bit. Don't suffer from burnout, friends. Enjoy life and live it. Don't simply work for it. Until next week, find time for a walk, enjoy the sunshine, and take some time to breathe.